4, 3. Hey, we're back. We're up here on the stage at the Heartland Cafe on a wonderful snowy morning.
It's still snowing.
We like it.
Just to let you guys know. Cuddle up under the covers. Listen to Live from the Heartland. It's still snowing. Yeah.
And just so you need to know this stuff, we are here every Saturday morning, and you can be part of the live listening audience. We have a good crowd today. Let's hear it from the crowd today.
Hey, all you breakfast.
Yes, we like it. And you can always hear us on WLUW.org on 88.7. And then a little bit later on, we put it up on youtube.com/heartlandmedia. It goes up on CanTV. And we are soon to announce our podcasts will be available. So there, that's a little promo, Kate.
That's a
I
lot
see that
of promo,
expression
dude.
in your eyes.
It's a
All
lot
right,
of promo.
let's get to the stuff at hand.
Okay, at hand. Welcome, Kevin Gostola.
Thank you for having me.
Did I say that right?
Yeah, you did.
All right, very good. Michael likes to turn Fire Dog Lake into Dog Lake Fire and other things like that. But tell people what Fire Dog
Dogs
Lake...
on Fire Lake.
Dogs on... That's right. It's also because one
It's
of
a
his
prominent
kids... One of his
site.
kids have a
Tell us
name.
about it.
Yeah, it's a national news blog. I've been doing a lot of coverage. I mostly do national security and civil liberties issues from this, doing daily writing. I got my name out there covering the Chelsea Manning trial, and now I'm here after spending a lot of time covering National Security Agency whistleblower Edward Snowden. I basically dropped what I'm doing and took an interest in the NATO 3 trial.
Marcus, how did you get interested in covering trials and conspiracies and looking at that part of the news?
Well, I just think it's very important. The way that the justice system is used against activists or dissidents is something that I've always found particularly interesting. And the way that now you look at a lot of cases, whether it's state level or national level, the choices that prosecutors make to bring cases, I find those to be significant and worth looking at.
Did you get into this interest from the legal part of it? Are you a law
No, it's
groupie?
more, I think, of a sense of I think I come more from a sense of social justice, of empathizing with what the people are doing who end up being the targets, and then looking at and scrutinizing power, which I think is what, if you're a journalist, that's probably what you should do. You should question the fact that they're bringing the cases in the first place.
Journalist, that's a word you don't hear that often anymore. And you don't see that many of them either. So congratulations on that. Michael, did you have a question? Or?
Well, we're going to talk about the NATO 3 trial, and I want to get into that, but I guess what made me think of it, we were talking about terrorism. Why do you think that this trial, the charges against the NATO 3, involved a new state law on terrorism? This is the first time, to my understanding, that this law is being used. It sounds like it's overkill. Even if they were the subjects were involved in a number of things, to try to put them away for a long, long time on terrorism seems a little bit out of the box.
Well, so far the burden is on the prosecutors to put forward some evidence that they were doing more than just talking. And I haven't heard or seen anything beyond that. And I think what happened here is that the case was being put together. I think there was every intention that the federal government was going to be ready to bring a case if they got any dangerous people who were going to threaten the NATO meeting when they were here in May 2012. But what happened is there wasn't any evidence.
So they made it up.
And so the state prosecutor, or in this case we have Anita Alvarez, the state's attorney, deciding that her office is going to take up the case and test this state terrorism. Yeah.
Anita to the rescue.
Let me get straight on the legal stuff here. Now, Anita Alvarez, we vote for her in Cook County, right?
Right.
Is she a state official, or she's the state's attorney for the city?
She's the state's attorney for the county.
Yeah.
Okay,
Cook
so
County
how does
State's
that jump to becoming a state case rather than like a local case?
Well, the people of the state of Illinois are the prosecutors that have brought the case forward. So they're using this terrorism law, and they're using other violations of, felony conspiracy statutes to go after these individuals. And in total, they face, I think I've seen the numbers anywhere between 40 to 85 years each if they were convicted of all these counts.
Have you had any contact with the defendants?
Nope.
Does anyone?
Well, there have
Just their
been
lawyers.
there are some people who are in Occupy Chicago who have been friendly and supportive of them because when they came here, they stayed in an apartment on the south side
Right.
and were rooming with some of these people.
Right.
Are all three of the defendants, did they know each other before they got here?
Yeah, they were in Florida. They drove up, and it was their plan. They were really excited to participate in a large political demonstration that was planned for the Sunday, which would have been May 18th before the meeting.
Yeah, that's the one I took part in, actually. And I read that one of them,
They didn't get to go.
No, because they were raided.
they were already in jail. Yeah.
Would you read us the testimony from the trial that refers to the Heartland? Because that basically kicked off a series of events. We showed up in a story that Mark Brown wrote. A couple other stories appeared. Someone contacted me about you. WBEZ had Katie and I on Wednesday afternoon in the afternoon shift talking about the trial and the case, etc.
Live from the Heartland visits the big time.
Give us a little bit of a intro here.
Yeah, so this is a flavor for what was happening in the city in the months before the NATO meeting. And just to be quickly put this into context, nationwide, whenever you have these NATO meetings or these big meetings where you have the Republican National Convention or Democratic National Convention, they designated a national special security event, which gives them carte blanche to send their squads into any parts of the city.
The Ninja Turtles.
Right. So this is a flavor here for what was happening in the trial. We had the defense attorney, Michael Deutsch. He represents Brian Jacob Church, one of the NATO 3, and he had this cross-examination of the undercover officer, one of the two. Her name is Nadia Chico. And so he said, do you
Is she
remember...
called Gloves?
Yeah, she was known as Gloves to the activists. So he asks her, well, this is the Heartland Cafe. It has been around 35 years in the Rogers Park community. And he brought this up because they were sending their officers into cafes. And she said, yes, sir, I worked in Rogers Park. I do recall this one, sir. And then he asked her, the reason you went there was because possible anarchists frequent and hold meetings there. That's how the police had justified it. And she answered, sir, like I said earlier, there have been in the past times where anarchists have infiltrated peaceful protesters or peaceful protester meetings, and at that time when we went to Heartland Cafe, we were just seeing if there was any criminal activity being talked about, discussed, or planned. So
Just about on a daily basis, at least until they legalize
Looking around the audience here. Anyone out there an anarchist?
Right.
Sympathetic?
The place is crawling with them. The place is
Any
crawling
democratic
with them.
centralists?
and wearing your violence on your sleeve so they can see it.
Yeah.
And then he eventually asked her, it says here in the report that there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 police officers. They had 6 police officers here.
I certainly
assigned.
hope they ate a lot.
And tipped well.
And she answered, sir, we go as a team. Just because you go in and you are assigned to it, you may be outside just doing surveillance, making sure your undercover is safe. The other officers that come that are on here are for our safety, sir. That doesn't mean they went in. So they felt like they would be in danger if they just sent one person versus 6.
It is a dangerous place.
Yeah.
People haul off and belcher for no reason here all the time.
Why did you choose the Heartland Cafe as opposed to some other restaurant, Deutsch asked.
The food is great.
And she said, I didn't choose it. That's what I was assigned that day.
Higher ups.
And then he noted that Mayor Washington and Senator Obama had been here before. And then eventually he got to the meat of the issue here and just confronted her and said, so you think as a Chicago police officer you have a right to go into a restaurant and listen to people's conversations to hear whether they are talking about criminal activity? And that was when the prosecutor objected, and the judge unfortunately didn't allow that question to be given an answer.
Well, just so Gloves and what was the other guy's name? Mo?
Yeah.
Gloves and Mo. Just so you know, if you're listening in, about the fate of earlier Red Squad people who came to the Heartland. One,
We won them over.
with his family and his kids, ended up going to Eureka Springs, I believe, in Arkansas, and I think wanted to open a health food restaurant.
Yeah.
And another one who gave me a lot of information over the more recent years, participated in the Athletes United for Peace 5K Heartland runs. So
Like I
maybe
said-
Mo and Gloves will turn out to be good folks. Right now,
Well,
I don't know.
we're talking to Kevin Gostola of Fire Dog Lake, a journalist who's covered whistleblowers before, and just briefly, was your coverage of the Bradley Manning court-martial your first big kind of breakthrough nationally?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I spent quite a bit of time going to Fort Meade there, and that was my first time covering a full case. And then now to come here, it's been very interesting to, as a reporter, compare the experience of being at the military base versus
Yeah.
being at the Cook County Criminal Courthouse.
Any quips on that comparison? you wanna
Just
give
that
us?
I actually have at times, and this is really odd, but at times I've actually wished that the U.S. military was prosecuting these people, because I actually feel like the public would have a better handshake, a more fair shake at getting in. They have to register and
Right.
get background checks in order to go to
Just
the
to
trial.
watch the
Just to
trial.
watch the trial.
Right.
and I heard that you need to, you got to get in there at the start and you have to stay the whole way through.
That's right.
Something like that. When you leave, it's quite just a big to-do to get back in if the proceedings are still
We
ongoing.
will, in fact, have Michael Deutsch on this stage again next week. We've had him before, but he'll catch us up next week from the inside on that.
Kevin, the judge is Thaddeus Wilson. What's your sense of this judge?
Watching him, I've seen him give some wide latitude, wide range. The defense has been able to go and ask a lot of questions. They were able to ask about these suspicionless surveillance activities going on 2 months before the meeting. And that was because the prosecutor didn't object. And he let the prosecutors dig themselves into a hole. And when they tried to fix it, he said, "It's your own fault. You should have objected earlier." And so there's been that. But then also there has been the issue that he does want them to be clear that they're not alleging that the police engaged in misconduct. Because in his view, he's
They're
looked
not
at
on
it.
trial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, one of the things, in looking up, just going to Google and doing the NATO 3, there's lots to read, a lot of reports, including yours. But one of the themes that runs through, not only from Truth Out, is that it looks like this is a weak case on the part of the prosecutors. I had heard differently from some lawyers I know who, one of them actually was Michael Deutsch. They were still concerned about where this was all going. What's your take on the trial so far?
I would be concerned simply because I don't have the historical perspective of both of you, but it's my sense that now
That
it's
means he's about half our age.
it's a lot harder to convince a jury when you've got police sent in to target and essentially entrap people into committing activities.
So, if the judge is warning folks or reminding folks that the police are not on trial here, we'll ask this of Michael Deutsch next week when he's up here, but what they can go for is like a mistrial or the entrapment issue. How does that come up in the legal? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, so what I was trying to articulate was that they're doing this very, it's like a word association type game. So they put the words of these activists from like their Facebook pages in front of the jury, and it's not good stuff. It doesn't make them look particularly good. And they show these weapons. They legally possessed some weapons that they brought up, some knife, sword, a bow and arrow, throwing star. This young guy had these weapons in his car, and he brought them up, not necessarily intending to do anything with them, but wanted to keep them because he's homeless or something, or he didn't have any place else to put his property. And so that's the case. And they're using these materials and their words to then say, here are the pictures of these characters, and we guess that they were probably going to do these violent things to people.
It seems odd that the police at this juncture don't have a little better handle on, sort of the grade of seriousness of a protester. And, a guy with throwing stars may have hurt someone with that. Had he made it to the demonstration, But since they incarcerated them before any of the demonstrations, right, they're left with supposition.
It's possible. I would have waited until at the demonstration they did that activity that was criminal, and then you arrest them for.
Well, of course, then they'd argued someone might have gotten hurt.
Sure, yeah. And so now you've had these three. They've actually been in jail for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
So I've heard some in the Chicago community suggest that they need to be taught a lesson and they need to learn that it was wrong for them to run their mouths. And I think, for the most part, they have probably learned their lesson, having served some time in prison.
Actually, we had the sheriff on last week, and he told us about them being in fairly isolated circumstances away from the general population.
Yeah.
And one of them had spent time in the hospital ward as well.
Another thing that comes up when you're looking up information on this is how these people are being portrayed. Are they violent protesters that, and plotters of violence, or are they just sort of entrapped young, naive agitators? Your sense on that?
Well, I think I'd rather put the attention on the police for picking these people and to talk about who they are at the same time, because it is clear that they were often drunk. They were probably often high on marijuana.
God help us.
One of them was probably had substance abuse issues, was doing some sort of thing often with cough syrup. It's not completely clear, but obviously these are people who were easy to prey upon and manipulate.
And that's all the police in this whole build up to NATO 8, to NATO and these demonstrations, that they only went after these three guys of all of the other people who came to town?
They began this operation in February 2012, and they started to go to cafes, punk rock shows. They went to meetings, like Occupy meetings, public gatherings, and they were there. They were looking for anyone who was talking about criminal activity openly, which I guess, they think happens a lot of times. I don't know a lot of criminals who talk openly in public about what they're going to do.
Or anarchists.
Well, let's see. Let me think about all the criminals I hang around with. Yeah.
Well,
no, they don't talk about
Kate,
it.
I'm sure.
And they found nothing. They spent all this time, and the only thing they came up with was a tip from a Chicago activist, I guess. His name's Henry Edwards. He's come up in the trial.
He's like a spy?
I'm not. It's not entirely clear. That should be part of the defense's case. Who is this person? But he tipped him off to two other people, because this used to be the NATO 5, and there were two guys.
That's right.
And their cases were settled in different ways.
Were they the guys from Cleveland?
No, they were here, but
they got off, right?
Miggs, and there's a guy whose nickname was Miggs, and there's a guy named Sabi. Those were their names, and their cases were settled individually. They had some punishment. One of the guy's on house arrest, but they eventually introduced these undercover officers to the NATO 3 on the May Day at the May Day rally after party.
What is the implication of the NATO 2 of the original 5 getting off? You think that'll have any ramification for this case?
I think it's brought the NATO 3 together. You made it stronger. I get the sense when I'm hearing about this case from activists who know them and have talked to them while they're in prison, that they're not going to turn on each other. And they know their words are going to be used against each other by prosecutors. And they've been willing to sit through that and not lash out at anybody because someone had a view that thought something different and they don't like it.
That's pretty disciplined.
Yeah, and so these two were the ones that didn't want to take their case to trial and risk the time of going to prison for terror charges or big severe felony charges. So they cooperated. One of the guys was kept in some really horrific solitary confinement. And so, now we're down to the NATO 3, and we'll see what happens with that.
So speaking of what happens, what do you think, what is on the docket this week as far as this case goes? Is it supposed to wrap up this week? Or?
Well, I encourage anyone who has any interest in this case to be at the courthouse on Monday if that's something that they think is possible, because the undercover officer, Mo, is going to be back on the stand. The defense has yet to have their turn with him, but that will begin in the afternoon on Monday, and that should be just as some parts of this trial are actually very amusing, which is, you know, it's shameless to some extent what the prosecutors are doing. It's unfortunate because you have to get this sort of amusement from a case where these men are probably going to go to jail for 10 to 20 years. But at the same time, we're learning a lot about the Chicago Police Department through this trial.
You know, I think some of the Chicago Police Department would be saying, no, you're learning a lot about Anita Alvarez.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of Chicago policemen who
I can't help
think
myself.
it's just as bad as we do that.
I heard Anita Alvarez speak at a meeting one time, and she, I think, spoke to the group, and she said a lot of nice things. And in office, she has been totally different. A kind of very conservative, not a very insightful, forward-thinking state's attorney.
Not sure what her motivation
I'm not sure.
is.
Yeah.
That's one of the things.
Well, what's the most important thing to you about this trial or your experience in covering it?
Well, I think it's very topical right now around the nation. We're talking about surveillance because we've had all these National Security Agency disclosures. And we talk about why it's wrong for indiscriminate surveillance to happen. This case is the example. They have fabricated this case out of suspicionless surveillance. This is all they had. 3 guys who ran their mouths on the Facebook, on their text messages, when they were talking to undercovers. They ran their mouths. They said things that they would like to do, either joking or sometimes they were reflecting.
They were just trying it out.
Well, also, I just quickly mention, weeks before the meeting, they got pulled over in their car by officers and were harassed.
I heard that. Right.
Billy Club to the skull was what one of the officers said.
Right.
Recounting like the 1968 Democratic convention here to them of what they could do at the NATO meeting to these guys.
Interesting.
Well, we're going to have you back on the show. This has been really good having you on, Kevin.
Congratulations
We're talking
on
to
your
Kevin
journalism.
Gustola, and he writes for Fire Dog Lake and also Salon, a bunch of these places.
Yeah.
He did the book on the... you're quite a guy. We're really glad to have made your acquaintance, and we hope you'll be a regular here on the show because you're certainly one guy who likes to look into a lot of important stuff we need to know about.
Thank you for having me.
All right, brother.
Okay, let's
We're
hear
gonna
it for
take a
Kevin
musical break,
Gustola.
and we'll be